So I'm an orphan? I don't know. Both my parents are dead. Is there a certain age where you stop being called an orphan? I was in my 30s. I wasn't like in a Dickens novel selling newspapers on the corner. My father passed away from cancer. He died at his home and we knew he was sick, so before he passed I went and spent time with him when he was on his deathbed. And I'd never been in that scenario before, and so it was interesting for me after being there for a few days how much it was sad, obviously, but also really fun at times, because it's sort of like this concentrated period where you like know you need to make it count. You've got like this intentionality and focus in a way that like I had never had when hanging out with my dad at any point in my life before. He had a palliative care doctor who's around death a lot, and I remember him saying like, yeah, there should be equal amounts laughter and tears during this process. And I remember that sticking with me and feeling like a little bit liberated by that, like, okay, I don't need to be like crying this entire time or feeling awful, like let's have fun. So we would, look through old photos. He would talk about, how he met my mom and talk about things that they did and places they traveled to and tell me stories from his youth. And we would listen to music that he loved, like Johnny Cash or Leonard Cohen albums, music that I remember him playing when we were growing up. We were like laughing a lot and having a good time, not what you kind of associate with someone on their deathbed. But then invariably a neighbor or a friend would come over to, see him, and the doorbell would ring, and like then this aura of gloom would just descend upon the home, because they're all like, oh, things are about to get heavy now, because that's what other people feel like they are supposed to mirror or introduce into the setting. They would show up and very well-meaning and intending to be compassionate, being like, oh, this must be so hard on you, this is so sad, this is so terrible. And it feels weird because you're like, actually we were just like laughing and having a great time. It wasn't sad until you showed up and told us how sad it was. But I don't want this stranger who I don't even know be more sad about my dad dying than I am. So then you kind of amp up your own level of sadness and grief. And I almost felt like a drunk driver performing sobriety for the cops. I was like, okay, I got to put my sadness face on. I'm going to, be equally as sad as this person. That would kind of take over for a while until the person left, and then, we might an hour or two later get back into the groove of making jokes or looking at pictures or something like that. So that stuck with me because, obviously these are people who had good intentions and were coming from a good place, but it was sort of this change of frame when someone else would come in. And thinking about how often we all do that of oh, I think this is supposed to be sad, so I'm going to make it sad, versus checking in with the other person and seeing where they're at. And so I always think that when I'm expressing condolences to someone else or grief, to be very cognizant of where they're at with things, to not try to initiate the sadness. Because I think a lot of times, whatever is the problem or issue that people are facing, you figure out a way to live with it. Like in that house with my dad at that moment, there was an underlying thing that was really tragic going on, but also it was natural and it brought us together and we were laughing and sharing memories and kind of having this really special moment that in a lot of ways was wonderful and that I'll remember for the rest of my life. So allowing that room for whatever processing this other person is doing can be kind of the most compassionate way to be with someone else. We talk a lot about how people grieve in their own ways, but I don't think we always talk about the scheduling. People grieve on their own schedule too, and when you are now is the time to grieve or to be sad, you're kind of imposing your schedule on that person. And I've also noticed a lot of times it's the people who maybe haven't suffered through these same things are the ones who most want to express this, whereas people who've been through a lot of bad stuff kind of get it. They're just like, how are you doing? I'm here if you need to talk. Also, we can not talk about this. We can do something else. We can laugh. We can listen to music. We can do anything, just kind of be in that space with them where you can let them take it wherever they kind of want it to go in that moment. And that was something that I learned through going through that process.